You have been told that getting angry is a natural response to disrespect, that if someone crosses you, you have to defend yourself, that if they twist your words, you have to set the record straight, that if they push at you, you have to make sure they know they cannot. Everything you have been taught about standing up for yourself was designed by people who have never studied power. The reply is the loss. The explanation is the surrender. The argument you finally won was the one that cost you the most. You know this already. You have lived it. The text you sent at midnight. The line you finally delivered at the dinner table. The meeting where you pushed back on the colleague who had been chipping away at you for weeks and walked out of the room wishing you had said it cleaner, kept the anger out of your voice, delivered the point without the heat. The point was right. The way you made it is what the room remembers and what you replay for the next 2 weeks. Every one of those moments felt like victory in the moment, and by morning, each one had become a small humiliation you would carry for years. You did not lose those moments because you were wrong. You lost them because you replied. This is not a one-time pattern. You have had this moment before. You had it last week with a different person. You had it last year with someone you no longer speak to. The names change. The heat in your chest does not. The reply you start typing in your head does not. It is the same reply every time. And every time you send it, the wrong people get inside your head and stay there long after they have gone home. There is an architecture for what happens next. It is 500 years old. It was written down by men who governed cities, survived courts that wanted them dead, and watched what reaction cost the men who could not control it. They learned that the reply is the loss. They learned that explanation is surrender. They learned what the heat in your chest is actually for, and what to do with it instead. By the end of this video, you will understand the 7 laws they left behind. You will know why the message lights you up the moment you read it. You will know what the provocation is actually asking. And you will know the exact moment in the cycle where most people break and start the whole pattern over again. After today, you will not have to. The man who wrote the master text for what we are about to do was a Florentine diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli. In 1513, he was arrested by men who had once been his colleagues. He was stripped of his office, tortured by a method called the strappado, and exiled from the city he had served for 14 years. He spent the next 14 years of his life on a small farm 7 miles south of Florence, in a village called Sant'Andrea in Percusina, writing the book that would eventually be banned by the Pope and stolen by every court in Europe. We call it The Prince. There is one sentence in that book almost no one quotes. It is the sentence that explains why a message from someone you barely respect can still ruin your week. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who is seen reacting has already lost his throne. Reaction reveals the man. Reaction shows the perimeter of his fear. The prince who survives is the one who is seen by his court but never read by them. Marcus Aurelius, sitting on the Danube frontier 1300 years earlier, called the faculty that does this work the hegemonikon, the ruling part of the mind. Carl Jung, 400 years after Machiavelli, identified the process by which insults actually function. They were not 3 philosophers working on 3 different problems. They were 3 philosophers working on the same one. This video walks through the 7 laws their work produced together. They are the architecture of the citadel. In chapter 18 of The Prince, Machiavelli writes a sentence that is usually mistranslated into something soft. The actual line is sharper. He writes that men in general judge by what they see far more than by what they understand. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few touch what you are, and those few do not dare oppose the opinion of the many. This is the first law. Perception is not a layer on top of reality. Perception is the reality you actually live inside. The person who has not learned this defends himself constantly, because he believes that if he just explains hard enough, people will eventually see the truth. They will not. They will see what he shows them. They will see his face flush, his voice raise, his fingers move across the screen at midnight. They will see the perimeter of his fear mapped out for them, on display. The provocation is a survey of that perimeter. Every text that arrives sharp enough to make your chest tighten is asking the same question. It is asking, where is the edge of your composure? Most people answer without realizing they have been asked. They answer with the speed of the reply. They answer with the length of the reply. They answer with the time of night the reply was sent. Each of these is a data point. The person who provoked you is reading the answer carefully. The colleague who said something just sharp enough at the meeting was not making a statement. He was running a test. The family member who said the thing at dinner that landed wrong was not telling you what she thinks of you. She was checking the perimeter. The friend who has gone silent for 3 days was not punishing you. She was waiting to see how loud your effort to be approved of would become. Machiavelli wrote that a prince should appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, and upright, but should be ready to act otherwise when the situation requires. The word he uses for this is not deception. The word he uses is virtu, strategic competence, the competence to control what is shown. He did not write the line because he admired liars. He wrote it because the prince, who could not control what was shown of him, did not last out the year. You do not need to lie, you need to stop revealing. The face does not change, the voice does not rise. The reply does not arrive at the time the sender is waiting for it. Whatever you are feeling is allowed to exist. It is just not allowed to be visible until you have decided what it costs to make it so. Reaction reveals the man. Composure conceals him. In 1809, in a room full of the most powerful nobility in Europe, the Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte spent 30 minutes screaming at his foreign minister, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand. He insulted his loyalty. He mocked his physical limp. He threatened his life in front of the court. He wanted a reaction. He wanted an explanation. Talleyrand stood without moving. His face did not change. He did not blink rapidly. He did not shift his weight. When the emperor finally ran out of breath and stormed out, Talleyrand adjusted his coat, turned to the silent court and said only, "What a pity that so great a man should be so ill-bred." He did not win because he had a better line. He won because he refused to step into the courtroom Napoleon was building. He refused to explain. This is the second law. The person who explains is the person on trial. The structure of a courtroom is not accidental. The judge sits elevated, still, watching. The defendant stands, sweats, talks, presents evidence, asks for the judgment to land in his favor. The dynamic of power is not about who is right. It is about who is asking to be believed. The law splits into 3 forms most viewers will recognize. The first is the public dig. The colleague who says something sharp enough to be heard, light enough to be deniable. The second is the private message. The text that arrives late, lands wrong, and waits for your reply. The third is the long silence. The person who stops answering and watches what your behavior, 3 or 4 days from now, will eventually reveal. All 3 are the same move. All 3 are asking you to step into the courtroom. The public dig wants a defense in front of witnesses. The private message wants a defense in writing. The long silence wants a defense delivered by the eventual collapse of your composure. They are not waiting to be educated. They are waiting to see whether the door opens. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must be a great pretender and dissembler. The word he used was not lie. The word he used was simulare, to represent, to compose. The prince does not need to falsify the inside. He needs to govern what is shown of it. The moment you explain a decision to someone who is provoking you, you have agreed to a courtroom you did not build. You have handed them the gavel. You are saying, "I accept that you have the authority to judge me." The verdict was never the point. The courtroom was. You will say at this point, "But if I do not defend myself, they will believe what they said." This is the most expensive sentence you say to yourself. They are not going to believe their version of you, less because you spent 90 minutes explaining yours. People who provoke you are not running on facts. They are running on the question. Your 40-paragraph reply is the door taken off its hinges. The person explaining is the person on trial. Viktor Frankl spent 3 years in 4 concentration camps. He survived Auschwitz. He survived the death of his pregnant wife and most of his family. He came out of the camps with one observation. He wrote it down in 1946. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote the same sentence in different words 17 centuries earlier. He wrote in Book 8 of the Meditations, "If you are pained by external things, it is not these that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." He called the part of the mind that does this work the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty. The part of you that decides what the stimulus becomes. This is the third law. The provocation is the stimulus. The reaction is the response. Between them is the gap. The gap is where you live. Everything else is a body on autopilot. Imagine the message arrives, the familiar one, the one with the small knife. The heat starts, the fingers move. The reply begins to write itself. Stop there. This is the moment the gap exists. The message is the stimulus. The reply is the response. The space between them is not empty. The space is where the judgment happens. The judgment is, this is an attack. I must defend. Or the judgment is, this is a survey of my perimeter. The perimeter is not for sale today. The same message produces 2 different afternoons depending on which judgment you make. The same dinner produces a peaceful drive home or a sleepless night depending on which judgment you make. The message did not change. The judgment did. The work is not to stop feeling the heat. The work is to extend the gap. Most people have a gap that is less than half a second wide. The reply is sent before the thought has finished forming. The hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the part of you that judges, has been bypassed entirely. You did not choose the reply. The reply chose itself. The Stoic practice was simple, and almost no one does it. 1 full breath, 1 slow look around the room, 1 question. Marcus Aurelius wrote the question down. Before he reacted to any provocation, he asked himself, is this in my control? The answer was almost always no. The behavior of the other person was not in his control. The words that had been said were not in his control. The only thing in his control was the judgment he was about to make about them. You do not need to feel less. You need to widen the gap between feeling and judgment until there is enough room in it to ask the question. The reply you do not send is the one you would have rewritten in your head for a year. Carl Jung, working in Zurich in the early 1900s, identified a process he called projection. The process is older than him. He just named it cleanly. The process is this. We cannot stand the things in ourselves that we have not faced, so we put them onto other people and attack them there. The neighbor we find too loud is the loud in us. The colleague we resent for being too ambitious is the ambition in us. The relative we call too cold is the cold in us. The accusation describes the accuser. The bullet flies the direction the gun is pointed. Jung wrote in his 1951 book, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The line is gentle. The process it describes is not. This is the 4th law. The insult is a confession, not a diagnosis. When someone names a thing about you with venom in their voice, they are showing you the thing they cannot tolerate in themselves. The colleague who calls you arrogant is paralyzed by his own irrelevance and needs to find someone whose presence reminds him of it. The family member who calls you cold is overwhelmed by her own loneliness and needs to find someone she can blame for not filling it. The friend who calls you difficult is exhausted by the work of holding her own composure and needs to find someone whose composure she can attack. You did not earn the accusation. You were just standing close enough to be the target. The bullet was loaded long before you walked into the room. The mistake almost everyone makes is to take the diagnosis seriously and try to refute it. To prove they are not arrogant by listing the times they were humble. To prove they are not cold by performing warmth. To prove they are not difficult by going quiet and easy in front of the person who attacked them. Every one of these moves accepts the central premise, that the diagnosis was real, that it required a response, that the accuser had the standing to make it. The accuser had no standing. The accuser was confessing. When you read an insult as a confession, the heat in your chest does not stop arriving. It does stop spreading. The familiar urge to defend yourself is replaced by a much quieter response. You see the person in front of you more clearly than they see themselves. You see the wound their accusation is trying to relocate. You see why they chose you to relocate it onto. You feel, for the first time in years, slightly less angry at the person provoking you. Not because they are not provoking, because they are not the author of what they are saying. They are the carrier. Machiavelli understood this even without Jung's vocabulary. He wrote that one should never trust a man who shows envy, because envy is the confession a man cannot stop making. The same is true of every form of provocation. The insult is the leak. The leak names what is inside. The insult is a confession. You are not the subject. You are the postbox. Those 4 laws are the architecture of how the provocation works. The next 3 are the architecture of what happens after you stop responding to it. They are the part of the practice most viewers find hardest, because the moment you stop reacting, the other person does not give up. They escalate. They go quiet, then come back louder. They tell other people you have changed. The cost of holding the line through that phase is the part of this work that almost no one finishes. In 1938, the American psychologist B.F. Skinner began publishing the results of a long series of experiments with rats and levers. He found something almost no one has stopped quoting since. If you teach a rat that pressing a lever produces food, the rat presses the lever. If you then turn the food off, the rat does not quietly walk away. The rat presses the lever harder. The rat presses it faster. The rat bites the lever. The rat throws its body against the cage. The behavior spikes before it dies. Skinner called the spike the extinction burst. Human beings run on the same machinery. When you stop reacting to someone who has been getting a reaction from you for years, they do not accept the new state. They escalate. They send a longer message. They send a sharper one. They tell other people you have changed. They tell other people you have become cold. They go quiet, then come back louder. They use the words they know will land. They wait for you to crack. This is the 5th law. The escalation is not the bill. The escalation is the receipt. The escalation is the proof that the previous laws have started working. You will say at this point, but the escalation hurts more than the original provocation. That is the design. That is the entire point of the burst. If the second wave did not hurt more, the burst would not exist as a behavior. Skinner's rats did not bite the lever lightly. They bit it as hard as they could. The intensity is calibrated to the level of pain required to make the food appear again. If you respond to the escalation, you have not protected yourself. You have only taught the person provoking you to hit the lever harder next time. This is the part of the practice that breaks most people. They hold the line for a day. They hold it for 3 days. They hold it for a week. And then the escalation arrives, the heat starts again, and they break. They send the reply. They give the explanation. They argue. And the lever produces food. The whole training resets. The cycle begins again. The next provocation will be calibrated by the person provoking you to the higher threshold you have just taught them is required. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 8 that the offense is not in the things that happen to you. The offense is in the judgment you make about them. The escalation is the things that happen. The pain you feel is the judgment you make. The judgment that the escalation must mean the practice is failing is itself the door opening. The truer reading is the opposite. The harder they push, the more accurately you have read the system. You hold the wall. The burst peaks. The burst exhausts. And the silence on the other side is the silence of someone who has just discovered that the food machine has been off for some time. The escalation is the receipt, not the bill. Machiavelli wrote in the Discourses that the prince who is always present becomes ordinary, and the prince who is ordinary cannot govern. The line is in direct conflict with the modern instinct to be constantly available, to reply to every message, to attend every event, to be reachable at every hour. The modern instinct is the loser's instinct. Machiavelli had seen what happened to leaders who tried to govern by being everywhere. They governed nothing. This is the 6th law. Familiarity is the death of authority. The more constantly accessible you are, the less your access is worth. The more reliably you respond, the more predictably you can be moved. The more you appear in the daily small economy of a person's attention, the less your presence registers when it matters. You think you are building loyalty by being available. You are building entitlement. You are training the people around you to treat your time the way they treat the lights in their kitchen. They notice you only when you stop working. The colleague who texts at every hour of the night does not love your accessibility. He uses it. The family member who calls in every minor crisis does not value your presence. She depends on it. The friend who knows you will answer within 20 minutes does not respect your time. She has calibrated her own around the assumption that yours has no edge. The law is not that you become cruel. The law is that you stop subsidizing. The reply that does not arrive within 20 minutes raises the price of the next one. The invitation you decline without an elaborate apology raises the price of the next one. The silence you do not rush to fill raises the price of the next sound you make. You are not punishing them. You are correcting the price of access that the years of over-availability have allowed to drift towards zero. This is the part most viewers will resist. You will say at this point, "But the people I care about will think I am pulling away. They will think I am changing." Some of them will. The ones who think this are the ones who have already calibrated their behavior around your over-availability. They will adjust. The ones who do not adjust are the ones who were running on you, not with you. You will lose some of them. You will lose them anyway. The only question is whether you lose them before or after they have hollowed you out. Machiavelli wrote that men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. He meant that what people respect is what costs them something. Access to you was costing them nothing. So they did not respect it. Make it cost. The respect arrives in the same envelope as the cost. Familiarity is the death of authority. Scarcity is its resurrection. Marcus Aurelius wrote the Meditations in a leather tent on the Danube frontier by lamplight on military campaign against the Marcomanni and the Quadi between 170 and 180 of the Common Era. He was in his late 40s. He had buried several of his own children. He had survived a plague that killed 5 million people across the empire. He wrote the Discipline in Greek because the men around him spoke Latin, and he did not want them to read it. The image he returned to most often was the citadel. He used the same word, the inner citadel, the acropolis of the soul, in 7 different passages. He used it because the image carries the whole architecture in one picture. The citadel does not need a defense. The citadel is a defense. When the wall is real, the knock at the door is not a crisis. The knock is just sound. It does not require a response. It does not require an explanation. It does not require a counter-knock. The wall is what the citadel is for. The wall is the practice. The wall is built from the first 6 laws. The Roman statesman Cato the Younger, who died long before Marcus Aurelius was born, was famous for his refusal to be moved. Once, walking through the forum, a political enemy approached him and spat in his face. Cato did not draw a weapon. He pulled out a cloth, wiped his face, and walked on. Another time he was struck during a public dispute. When the man came to apologize, Cato looked at him without recognition and said, "I do not remember being struck." He was not pretending. He had built a wall thick enough that the strike did not enter the citadel. The strike happened in the forum. It did not happen inside him. This is the 7th law. The work is not to win the provocation. The work is to build the citadel so well that the provocation never enters. The citadel is not the absence of feeling. The citadel is the architecture that decides what feeling becomes. The heat in your chest is allowed to arrive. The heat in your chest does not get to govern your afternoon. Machiavelli and Marcus Aurelius were not in agreement about most things. The Florentine wrote about how power is taken and held. The Roman wrote about how a self is kept intact. But on this one point, their work converges exactly. The man who is read can be moved. The man who is not read holds the room. Machiavelli called this the prince who is feared but not hated. Marcus Aurelius called it the soul whose retreat is always available. They were describing the same wall, viewed from 2 different sides. You build the citadel one provocation at a time. Each text that arrives and is not answered is a brick in the wall. Each dinner comment that lands and does not become a sleepless night is a brick in the wall. Each colleague who steals credit and is met with a flat look is a brick in the wall. The wall is not built in a week. The wall is built in years. But every brick is laid in a single moment of choice. The gap, the judgment, the decision that the door does not open. The citadel does not need a defense. It only needs a wall. 7 laws. Reaction reveals the man. Explanation is submission. The gap between stimulus and judgment is the whole game. The insult is a confession, not a diagnosis. The escalation is the receipt, not the bill. Familiarity is the death of authority. The citadel does not need a defense. It needs a wall. The message is still on your phone. The reply you are going to send is still half written in your head. The colleague is still in the meeting room next door. The family member is still going to be at the next dinner. None of that has changed. What has changed is what you see when you look at it. The message is a survey of your perimeter. The reply is the answer they were waiting for. The escalation, if it comes, is proof the wall has started to hold. The insult, when it lands, is the leak that names what is inside the person who sent it. None of it is what it pretended to be. It was a test of access. It always was. This is not easy work. Machiavelli wrote his book in poverty on a farm 7 miles from the city that had cast him out. Marcus Aurelius wrote his in a leather tent surrounded by men who wanted his throne. Jung wrote his in the shadow of 2 world wars. They did not pretend the work was light. They did not pretend the wall went up in a week. They wrote the manual because they had needed it themselves, every day, for years. You have just spent 25 minutes inside the architecture, on purpose, learning the shape of it. That is 25 minutes the pattern did not run on you. The next time the message arrives, the gap will be slightly wider than it was this morning. The wall will be slightly more real. That is the only thing this video can give you. The rest is what you do the next time the phone lights up. If you want more of the philosophy that holds up against the pressure of modern life, the kind that gives you back the control of your own mind and your own life, subscribe. There is a whole library of these laws waiting for you.